these are things that I think should include a very rational perspective
For sure.
and one that benefits you guys the most in the long run. And
Right.
that might mean being about as frugal as you can possibly get with the wedding. That might mean saying, we're going to do things a little unconventionally because we're setting ourselves off through 2024 with a whole new mindset surrounding wealth creation and debt elimination, and having this sort of noisy budgeting process, which is a new fad that people are talking about. And it's where you're actually very vocal instead of very private and sensitive about your money. And you're actually telling family and friends, this
Mhm.
is what our objectives are. We haven't come as far as we've wanted to over the past few years. We're making some headway, but we want to move a lot faster. For that reason, we don't want to delay the wedding, but we are going to make it a potluck. How does that change, in your opinion, the sentimentality of the wedding itself? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I can't ask both parties because Jessica's not here to talk to about that. But if it were me,
Mhm.
I would be extremely concerned about where I'm at versus where I want to be for the age I am.
Mhm. So
Because, yeah, go ahead.
we are very much on the same page with that, and we're on the same page as you. In fact, I believe so far the only cost, um, typical wedding cost, is that we do want to have it catered, but as a fallback, we have talked about doing a potluck instead. Um,
Do it. And do it BYOB. Tell me what dinner party you show up to empty handed to anyway.
right.
Everybody that ever comes to my house to visit, because I literally have dozens and dozens of visitors a year that come and stay with us for a weekend or a week, they show up with all their stuff.
Yep.
And it doesn't fall on my shoulders to be
Exactly.
the financier behind that experience. We want you to be there with us, but it
Right.
is not something where we're going to cover all the costs involved. And if somebody feels as if that's an unaffordable event for them, okay, so what? Fine. I mean, I personally would look very, very closely into that if I were you, because I can assure you that any expense that falls on your shoulders is not going to be a setback that feels extremely worth it to you over the long run. It
Mhm.
might in the moment, and you'll get some short-term gratification out of it, as does everybody when they attend a really nice wedding. And when I say really nice, I mean whether it's expensive or not, a really nice wedding is certainly something to pull together. And I think you can do that without spending much, if anything, other than your own meal and your
Yeah.
own BYOB. And I guarantee you, if you're getting married, people are going to be more than happy to supply that on your behalf anyway. So it's creative and it is a little off the wall, but at the same time, this is becoming a more and more popular concept. And I'm glad to see it, because this is not how you and I were raised. You and I were raised with money being very private. My parents didn't like to talk
Yeah,
about money, and we certainly didn't talk about money with our friends.
for sure.
And now I talk about money with my friends all the time. I talk about money with my siblings all the time. And I think being really loud about it, that noisy or loud budgeting concept, is fantastic. And you can be so transparent about it. Don't try to minimize it. Don't try to be ambiguous as to why you're doing your wedding that way. Be boisterous about it, and people will stand and rally behind you. And you can just explain that you want to set your matrimony off on the right course from the beginning.
Right.
Because the other concerns that I have, aside from these expenses that are coming up, is you're right. There's what I would encourage you to look at as a considerable amount of debt
Hmm.
that is currently unpaid. Right? We're talking 60 plus thousand with those student loans involved.
Right.
And so these aren't small numbers, and it doesn't get you anywhere closer to where you're telling me you are, because you're also explaining how sick of not being able to be with the family you are and how many hours you're putting in, and you sort of feel like it's taking longer than it should, right? So these are, again, conflicting priorities. Priority one, a wedding. It's expensive. Priority two, pay off debt. That money can't go to two places at one time, right? So you're going to have to decide what is the bigger priority for you in this situation. So I'm only pointing those concerns out so that we can actually look them head on and say, now what, right? What really is the game plan? Because when I look at this cash flow cruncher, I see a light at the end of the tunnel. Right. You can get there. You can get there. And I wouldn't be looking at this and saying to myself, oh, this is a 3-year strategy. I would be looking at this and saying, how can I do this by the time I'm 45 years old? Okay. And it's 9 years or 10 years when you're in the midst of the plan feels like eternity.
Right.
10 years from now, you'll look back and be like, where'd the time go?
Right. I'm already there, man. My daughter's about to be 8, and I'm like, how?
I know.
8 years? Where'd that go?
It's true. And it is a dilemma. And it's a dilemma. I've had this conversation, same exact conversation with my business partner about. You know, he's only a couple years younger than you. And, you know, he's got 3 little ones. And they're all under 5 years old. And he's saying oftentimes the same thing. Like, I don't want all this time to pass me by if we're going to be busting our asses for 10 years.
Right.
And I'm like, dude, I get it.
I'm already
And also, guess what? Don't bust your ass for the next 10 years. Take all the time you want with your family now, and you'll be working until you're 75. Right. So while you won't necessarily miss as much of years 5 through 15, don't expect to always be able to be around during ages 25, 35, 45, because you're still going to be working. Whereas if we put in that hard effort now, we have a substantially better chance that you can retire long before people typically do and spend all of your free time with them when they're late teens and young adults and getting married and having your grandbabies. And so I leave the choice up to him. He can do whatever he wants, just like you can. You get to do whatever you want too. But you know, you just have to take your pick, which one you prefer. And you just have to know that it's either or. You don't get the opportunity in most cases to have both. It doesn't translate.